When I was 23, I worked in a small company in the city. Every morning I woke up at 6:30. I took a crowded train to work. I spent most of my day answering emails, making reports, and attending meetings. My life felt very simple. Sometimes when I looked at social media, I felt a little jealous. I saw people traveling to beautiful places. I saw people eating in fancy restaurants. I saw people taking photos in hotels with amazing views. I always had the same thought: that must be expensive. One Tuesday afternoon, I was eating lunch with my co-worker Amy. We sat in the office pantry with our lunch boxes. Amy was looking at her phone and smiling. "What are you looking at?" I asked. She turned her phone toward me. It was a photo of a restaurant. The lights were warm. The table looked beautiful. Outside the window, I could see the city skyline at night. There was steak, dessert, and a glass of red wine. I stared at the photo for a few seconds. Then I said, "Wow, that must be very expensive." Amy laughed. "Not really," she said. I looked at her in surprise. "Come on, look at that place." She smiled. "It wasn't as expensive as you think." I shook my head. I did not believe her. For me, beautiful things always came with a high price. A luxury hotel was expensive. A nice restaurant was expensive. A happy life was expensive. At least, that was what I believed. After work, I walked home from the train station. The streets were busy. People were rushing home. Some were talking on the phone. Some were carrying shopping bags. I suddenly wondered how many of them were richer than me. Maybe everyone else knew something I didn't. Maybe everyone else had more money. That evening I called my father. We talked for a few minutes. As usual, he asked me about work. As usual, I complained about money. "I need a better job," I said. "Why?" he asked. "I want a better life." There was a short silence. Then he laughed softly. "Who told you a better life costs a lot of money?" I smiled. "Isn't that obvious?" My father did not answer immediately. Instead, he said something strange. "Many people spend years chasing expensive things." He paused. "Then one day they discover the best things were cheap all along." At the time, I did not understand what he meant. Honestly, I thought he was just trying to make me feel better. I had no idea that his words would stay in my mind for a very long time. And I definitely did not know that they would change the way I looked at life. After my talk with my father, I could not stop thinking about his words. The best things were cheap all along. At first, I disagreed. I still believed that money was the answer to most problems. But over the next few months, I started noticing small things around me. One morning, I arrived at work early. The office was quiet. Only one person was there. It was Kevin from the marketing team. He was sitting by the window with a book in his hands. I looked at the cover. It was an old book. The corners were worn. "New book?" I asked. Kevin smiled. "No, I bought it second-hand." "How much was it?" $3. I laughed. $3? He nodded. Then he tapped the book gently. This book changed the way I think. On my way back to my desk, I felt surprised. $3 could change someone's life? That sounded impossible. A few days later, I met my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She was almost 60 years old. Every morning, I saw her walking in the park. Rain or shine, she never missed a day. One afternoon, I asked her, "Why do you walk every day?" She smiled. "It helps me stay healthy." "Do you go to a gym?" She shook her head. "No, the park is free." I looked at her bright face and relaxed smile. She looked happier than many people I knew, including some people who earned much more money than me. Then there was Amy, the same co-worker who showed me the restaurant photo. One evening, we stayed late at work. While waiting for a report to finish, we started chatting. "You always seem happy," I said. She laughed. "Not always. But more than most people." Amy thought for a moment. Then she showed me a photo. This time it was not a restaurant. It was her family sitting around a small dinner table. The food looked simple. There was soup, rice, vegetables, and fish. Nothing fancy. "We eat together every Friday," she said. "Every Friday?" She nodded. "No matter how busy we are." I stared at the picture. The table was small. The food was simple. But everyone was smiling. For some reason, I kept looking at that photo. Later that night, I sat alone in my apartment. I thought about Kevin. I thought about Mrs. Chen. I thought about Amy's family dinner. A second-hand book. A walk in the park. A meal with family. None of these things were expensive. In fact, most of them cost almost nothing. So why did they seem so valuable? Why did the people who had them look so content? The question stayed in my mind for days. Finally, during a phone call with my father, I asked him, "Dad, if these things are so cheap, why don't more people have them?" My father chuckled softly. The sound felt warm through the phone. Then he said, "Because they are cheap in money." He paused. "But they are expensive in attention." I sat quietly. He continued, "People are willing to spend money. Many are not willing to spend time." At that moment, I did not fully understand his words. But deep inside, something had already started to change. And soon, life would teach me exactly what he meant. Spring arrived quietly. The weather became warmer. Trees turned green again. At work, however, life became even busier. Our company started a new project. Everyone worked long hours. Some people stayed at the office until midnight. I was one of them. At first I told myself it was only temporary. Just one busy month. Then things would get better. But 1 month became 2. And 2 became 3. One Sunday morning my phone rang. It was my father. I answered while checking emails on my laptop. "Hello, Dad." "Are you busy?" he asked. "A little." I heard him laugh softly. "You always say that." I smiled. "Because it's true." There was a short pause. Then he said, "Your mother wants to cook your favorite dishes today." I looked at the unfinished work on my screen. The deadline was close. "I don't think I can come today." "That's okay," he replied. "We can do it another time." His voice sounded normal, so I did not think much about it. A few weeks later, he called again. This time it was a Saturday afternoon. "I found some old photo albums," he said. "I thought we could look at them together." I was sitting in a coffee shop with my laptop open. There were charts, reports, and messages everywhere. "I'd love to," I said, "but I really need to finish something first. Maybe next weekend." "Sure," my father said, "next weekend." The next weekend came, and I was busy again. Then another weekend passed, and another. Each time I had a reason, a meeting, a deadline, an important client, a project that could help my career. My father never complained. He never sounded angry. He simply said, "Maybe next time." One evening, after a long day at work, I opened my phone. There were several photos from my mother. In one photo, my father was watering flowers on the balcony. In another, he was sitting at the dining table. A bowl of fruit sat in front of him. He smiled at the camera. Under the photos, my mother had written, "Your father misses you." I stared at the screen. For a moment, I felt guilty. I thought about calling him. But then a work message appeared. A client needed an answer. I put down my phone and returned to work. Days passed. Then one Friday night, I finally called home. My father answered quickly, as if he had been waiting. We talked about small things, the weather, the neighbors, his garden. Before hanging up, he said, "Are you free next Sunday?" I looked at my calendar. The boxes were full, meetings, deadlines, tasks. "I'm not sure," I said. "I'll try." My father was quiet for a second. Then he replied, "Okay." His voice sounded different this time, softer, tired somehow, but I was too distracted to notice. After we ended the call, I returned to my work. I believed there would always be another Sunday, another family dinner, another chance. I believed time was something I could spend later. I was wrong. 3 days later, at nearly midnight, my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I heard her crying, my heart dropped. "Your father is in the hospital," she said. Everything around me suddenly felt silent. I do not remember how I got to the hospital that night. One moment I was sitting at my desk. The next, I was running through the hospital doors. My heart was beating so fast that it hurt. The bright lights in the hallway made everything feel unreal. When I found my mother, her eyes were red from crying. She stood up as soon as she saw me. "How is Dad?" I asked. My voice was shaking. She took a deep breath. "The doctor says he is stable now." I felt a little relief, but only a little. My mother pointed towards a room at the end of the hallway. "He's inside." I walked slowly toward the door. For the first time in years, I was afraid to see my father. When I entered the room, everything became quiet. My father was lying in bed. Machines stood beside him. Thin tubes ran from his arm. He looked smaller than I remembered. Older, too. A few months ago, he had been working in his garden. Now he looked tired, very tired. When he saw me, he smiled. It was the same warm smile I had known all my life. "Hey," he said softly, "you came." I wanted to answer, but no words came out. A heavy feeling filled my chest. I pulled a chair next to the bed and sat down. For a while, neither of us spoke. The room was silent except for the sound of the machines. Then my father looked at me and chuckled. It was a weak laugh, but it was still his laugh. "You finally have time now." The moment I heard those words, something broke inside me. I lowered my head. Tears fell onto my hands. I tried to stop them. I could not. Because suddenly I understood everything. All those phone calls, all those invitations, all those Sundays. My father had never asked for money. He had never wanted expensive gifts. He had never cared about fancy restaurants. He only wanted one afternoon, one meal together, one walk, one conversation. Things that cost almost nothing. Yet I had treated them as if they were too expensive. I looked at my father. "Dad, I'm sorry." My voice was barely a whisper. He shook his head gently. "There is nothing to be sorry about." But I kept saying no. His eyes softened. "You were building your life." I wiped my eyes. But I missed so much. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I will never forget. "Money comes back." He paused. "Many things come back." His eyes met mine. But time doesn't. The room felt smaller. Every missed dinner, every delayed visit, every promise of next week. They all returned to me at once, and for the first time I saw the truth clearly. The most valuable things in life are often the cheapest. A phone call, a family dinner, a walk with someone you love, a quiet afternoon together. They cost almost nothing. Until the day you realize you may not get them again. That night, I stayed in the hospital until morning. I did not check my emails. I did not think about deadlines. I simply sat beside my father. And for the first time in a very long time, I understood what truly mattered. My father stayed in the hospital for several weeks. Thankfully, he recovered little by little. Each time I visited, he looked a bit stronger. His smile returned. His voice became louder. And every time I walked into his room, he would joke, "Look who's here." I always laughed. But deep inside, I knew something had changed. Not in him, in me. For years, I believed that a better life was waiting somewhere in the future. I thought I needed a bigger salary, a better position, a nicer apartment. Then I would finally have time for the people I loved. But sitting beside my father's hospital bed taught me something important. Life was not waiting for me in the future. Life was already happening. Every ordinary day, every phone call, every dinner invitation, every Sunday afternoon. When my father finally returned home, I started making different choices. Not huge choices, small ones. But they changed everything. I began visiting my parents every week. Sometimes we had a big meal. Sometimes we only drank tea and talked. Sometimes we sat together and watched old television shows. Nothing special happened. Yet those became some of my favorite moments. I also started calling my parents more often, even if I only had 10 minutes. Even if I had nothing important to say. My father never seemed disappointed. In fact, he always sounded happy to hear my voice. Slowly, I noticed other changes too. I started reading again. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I enjoyed learning. I took evening walks after work. I spent less time scrolling on my phone. I spent more time talking to friends. The strange thing was that none of these habits were expensive. Most of them cost almost nothing. Yet they made my life feel richer, warmer, more meaningful. One evening, many months later, I was having dinner with Amy, the same co-worker who had once shown me the restaurant photo. We talked about work, family, and life. Then she suddenly asked, "If someone gave you $1 million today, what would you buy?" I smiled. A year earlier, I would have answered very differently. Maybe a luxury apartment. Maybe a fancy car. Maybe a long vacation. But now I shook my head. "I don't know." Amy laughed. "Really?" I looked out the window for a moment. Then I thought about my father. I thought about the hospital. I thought about all those missed Sundays. And all the Sundays I had now. Finally, I answered, "I think the things I value most aren't for sale." Amy looked curious. "Like what?" I smiled. "Time with the people I love." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she nodded quietly, as if she understood. Today, if someone asks me, what is something that looks expensive but is actually cheap? My answer is simple. A walk with your parents, a meal with your family, a call to an old friend, an afternoon with someone you love. These things seem ordinary. They seem cheap. Many people think they can always do them later. I used to think that too. But now I know better. Because when you still have them, they cost almost nothing. And when they are gone, no amount of money can bring them back.